Welcome to the UX Consultants Lounge. I'm Kyle Susi, founder of Usable Interface, an independent UX research consultancy. You can find out more about my work and the services I offer at my website, usableinterface.com. I'll be your host here at the lounge, where I'll be providing a place for UX consultants to gather, share stories, and learn more from one another. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to share something special with you. If you're planning to attend the Information Architecture Conference this year, I've been asked to share a $50 discount promo code. You can use the code UX Lounge when you register to save $50 off your ticket. Now, I've been attending IAC since 2005, and I've been running their Career Center since 2017. It's one of the most supportive, generous communities in our field. The conversations are deep, the people are thoughtful, and it's a space where consultants and in-house folks alike can really connect and grow. This year, the main conference of IAC will be held in Philadelphia from April 16th to April 18th. Sadly, I'll be missing it this year because of a family commitment, which breaks my heart a little, I'm not going to lie. But I truly encourage you to go if you can. It's a wonderful experience, and I know so many meaningful relationships and opportunities have started there. Again, that code is UX Lounge for $50 off, and the conference website is theiaconference.com. Now, on to today's episode. When I first had the idea for this podcast, there were people on my wish list, and today's guest was right at the top. Jeff Gothelf is an incredibly accomplished consultant, speaker, and author. His book, Forever Employable, is the one I recommend most often to anyone that's considering consulting, or even for internal folks that are just looking to create their own personal brand. It's practical, honest, and deeply encouraging. And I'll admit something a little vulnerable here. In that book, Jeff writes that he'll never turn down an invitation to be on someone else's podcast, because that's part of the Forever Employable philosophy of just taking advantage of opportunities. But even knowing that, I was still nervous to reach out. I think we all wrestle with that fear of rejection. So I'm especially grateful that he said yes. In this conversation, we talk about how Jeff made the leap into independent consulting, how Lean UX came to be, what it was like building and then leaving his previous consultancy called Neo, how he thinks about partnerships and his partnership with Josh Seiden, how content marketing is a long-term strategy, as well as positioning, and what it really takes to become forever employable. There is so much wisdom packed into this episode. I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's dive in. Please enjoy Jeff Gothelf. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the UX Consultants Lounge.
It's good to be here, Kyle. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you as a guest. Aside from being an incredibly accomplished consultant, I found your book, Forever Employable, to be the book that I recommend most often to anyone that's looking for advice on becoming a consultant or even just to future-proof their career. But let me just begin by thanking you for accepting my invitation to be a guest and for writing that amazing book.
I'm thrilled to be here, and it's really nice to hear. And it's nice to hear that it was that book that was inspirational. I'm really proud of that book. If you look at the books that I've written, it's definitely the different one. It's sort of the one that's not like the others. I hear relatively regularly that book was helpful to somebody, was inspirational to somebody, that got them to try something new. That really makes me happy, I think, because it's been a good journey for me overall. And so if it gives back a little bit, I'm happy that it does.
Oh, it gives back a lot, and I'm going to talk about it a lot during this interview, because I do have So many things that I want to discuss, so many topics about consulting. But let's start at the beginning of your consulting journey. Can you fill the listeners in on how that started?
For me, my understanding was that my life was going to go the way my parents told me it was going to go, right? So you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, and you work your way up the corporate ladder for X number of decades, and then you retire. And that's kind of the path that I was on for a while. The first dot-com bubble threw a bit of a wrench in that. We bounced around a little bit. The financial crisis in 2008 threw another little wrench in that, bounced around a little bit there. But there came a point, this is 2012, right? So in 2012, I was 13 years into my career. I actually got a little bit of a late start because I spent some time after college not getting a job, like my parents told me, but rather playing in a band and touring the East Coast of the United States as a
Nice.
broke musician for a bunch of years, which was really fun, and no regrets there. So I got a little bit of a late start. Then my cohort, right, into the working world. But about 13 years into my career, I made the realization. And at that point, I was married. I had 2 kids, a house, all a couple cars in the suburbs, the whole thing. And it became evident to me right around that time that the path that I was on was becoming increasingly dangerous from an employment perspective. Because as you work your way up through the corporate ladder, by design, there are fewer and fewer jobs. That's the nature of corporate organizations. There aren't going to be more bosses. There are going to be fewer bosses, and salaries go up, right? So fewer opportunities, higher paychecks, which is great, but also it means fewer opportunities. That was the bottom line. And that felt too risky to me.
Yeah.
And so I needed to find a way out. Now, I was lucky because at that point in my career, I was fairly entrenched in both the UX design, sort of the design product and agile communities in New York City. And I was going to meetups and I was meeting folks and I was a part of the conversation at that point. And I'd met Josh Seiden at these meetups and he and I had gotten to know each other. And so a third person who I'd not met before had approached Josh about starting a consulting company on its own as a new venture. He was an entrepreneurial guy named Giff Constable. And I didn't know Giff at the time. And Giff said, "Hey, Josh, what do you think about adding this guy, Jeff?" And Josh was like, "Oh, I've just met him recently. And seems like an interesting guy." And so the three of us met and decided to launch an agency in 2012. But I wasn't in any position to just quit my job on a Friday and then the following Monday start working in an agency that wasn't going to pay me money. We didn't have any clients. We didn't have anything. I was not in that. I didn't have the runway. I had maybe, I think generously 6 months of runway, probably
Uh-huh.
3 months realistically. And so what I needed was a bridge. I needed a bridge out. And so I said, "Look, I'll join you guys. Let's make this happen. But what I need to do is I need to find a consulting gig. I need to find a freelance gig, something along these lines that continues to pay me while we build this thing at the same time." And so I looked around for a bit and I managed to find one at this company. The company they were called Gust. And Gust was a SaaS product for angel investors. An interesting niche product at the time. And they were looking for help with design and research, et cetera. I knew the VP of product there at the time. And so I managed to get a consulting gig there. And that was my jump. So I
Okay.
scored that. I quit my job and took that consulting role at Gust, knowing it was temporary, knowing it was part time, with the goal of building Proof Labs as kind of in the background and eventually building that company together with Josh and Giff.
So that wasn't the Neo innovation.
Well, it is. So 9 months into Proof, Neo came along and bought Proof. Now, Neo at the time
Oh,
was a guy. It was a guy named Ian McFarland, who's a lovely human being, who had met some investors from Japan who had decided that they wanted to recreate IDEO. That was the kind of the vision for Neo was let's recreate IDEO. And they hired Ian and they said, "Ian, here's a bunch of money. Go out into the world and buy a bunch of agencies and roll them up so that we can have So it doesn't take us, whatever, 30 years to get IDEO. It takes us a year to at least get the personnel in place. And Ian was a friend of ours, and he came to us immediately and he said, hey, how would you like to be the New York City office of Neo? And we said yes, because we had nothing to lose. At that point, 9 months into our agency, we didn't have that. It was an acqui-hire. We didn't
Acqui-hire,
sell.
yeah.
Yeah, we didn't sell any book of clients or anything like that. It was more like he needed people that he knew and that he could trust in New York to run the New York office. So that became the New York City office of Neo. And then we had 6 other offices around the world. And that was the beginning of that organization.
And Gust, how long were you independently consulting for them?
I think it's hard to remember now. It feels like it was about 6 months, maybe. I feel like that's about right in hindsight, because I needed to work, I needed the money, but I also needed some flexibility to start building this thing on the side, as it were, until it could become the full-time thing.
I'm curious about your mindset then. So you're doing your own thing, you've got a client, Gust, you've got some flexibility there. Were you wanting and actively seeking partners? Did you wanna not do it alone, or were you hoping to go it alone?
So, no, I was not actively seeking partners. I'll be honest with you, I never saw myself as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
It just wasn't a thing that I considered myself at all. I was like, okay, I guess if you have a good idea, I'll help you execute it. But I never saw myself as kind of the entrepreneurial type. And so I wasn't looking for partners in that sense. I was happy to continue doing this on my own. But if we're going to start a company, I definitely did not want to do that on my own. So I was grateful for the opportunity to join Josh and Gif on that journey, because I would never have done that on my own at that time in
Okay,
my life.
okay. And Neo Innovation was eventually acquired, right, by Pivotal Labs, is that right?
Ultimately, yeah. So 2015, Neo ended up being sold to Pivotal Labs, which is ironic because Neo's very first office was inside Pivotal Labs, New York. We knew them, they were friends, and they gave
Oh,
us a couple of desks to work at for a while. And then ironically, that whole organization was sold to Pivotal Labs in 2015. And that's officially when I set out sort of on my own solo. But it's important to call out, though, that in the 4 years that we ran Neo, the work that I did there was brand building for the organization and brand building for myself through content marketing. So while I did lead a few projects and I was a partner in the business, I also ran my own small business unit inside the organization, which was focused on content and thought leadership. So I spent a lot of time on the road giving talks and speeches. I taught classes and workshops and seminars and webinars and that type of thing, training and a little bit of coaching, with the hope that all of that would lead to product design and development work for the studio. But at the same time that I was building a brand for Neo, I was building a brand for myself as well. And so when Neo ended in 2015, I already had this business that I had the luxury of spending 4 years inside Neo and eventually getting a salary to build, so that when Neo ended, all I really did, Pivotal didn't want my little content business. For them, it was little. For me, it was significant. They didn't want it. So I was like, okay, can I have it and go? And they're like, yeah, you can go. Like, okay, bye. And all I did really was I just changed the logo, right? So where it once
uh,
said Neo, now it just said Jeff Gothelf. And everything else was basically the same. The content, the ideas, the classes, the workshops, the speeches, everything was the same. And so I felt a lot more comfortable doing it then on my own, because I had those 4 years to ramp up that business.
sure, and during that time, is that when you wrote Lean UX?
Then UX came out in 2013. So I
Okay.
actually started writing it in 2010 while I was still employed at the Ladders in New York, because that's where we were doing the work. But because I was a terrible writer back then and I had no idea how to write a book, and publishers don't teach you how to write a book. They just they're like, you want to write a book? You're like, sure, I'll write a book. And then they're like, okay, see you in 6 months with 50,000 words. And you're like, what? How do I produce like 50,000 words? If the longest thing you've ever written is 750 words, which is probably the longest thing I'd ever written at that time, 50,000 words feels like Mount Everest. Like, how am I going to climb this thing? So it took a long time to get that out into the world. And so it took until I began partnering with Josh Seiden regularly. And he ultimately came on board as initially editor and then ultimately co-author to help bring that book across the finish line. And with his help, we were able to launch it in 2013. So it became part of the whole Neo content marketing machine, right? We're the authors of Lean UX. Lean UX is very popular, right? It provides answers to tough questions that a lot of companies are facing. So that was part of it. But that really, like, the success of that book really pushed the success of my little thought leadership business inside Neo and really gave me the momentum to take it out in 2015.
I definitely want to talk more about that book and just your writing in general. Before I do that, you mentioned the ladders. And I actually did work for them. They were a client of mine in 2013, shortly after you left.
Well, we
And
just
they
missed
were
each other.
still singing your praises. They talked a lot about you. So it was in
Oh, good. I'm
good
glad to hear
thing.
this was still going on back then.
Yeah, yeah. But I was wondering, okay, so Pivotal uh, is now you, just Pivotal ends, and you're on your own. Was it always the plan to stop doing design work and move into coaching and training design teams instead, or did that happen later?
No, I was terrified about that.
Mm,
Terrified. Really, like, I was really worried about it, right? I liked doing design work. B, I
mhm.
liked leading design teams. I liked that whole aspect of the work, and the more that Lean UX succeeded, the more that this content and thought leadership and business was succeeding, the less and less design work I was doing. I was kind of holding on by a thread by running one or two projects here and there that were in the studio at Neo at the time. And so when that ended, I had the opportunity to continue it, and it was paying really well at the
Mhm,
time. So it's hard to go back to just doing design work. But I remember reaching out to Dan Saffer,
mhm.
and I wonder if he remembers this conversation. I haven't seen him or spoken to him in a very long time. But at the time, I don't remember exactly how I reached out to him. Maybe it was like Twitter was fun back then. Maybe it was through Twitter. It was a good design Twitter back in like the mid tens. It was really nice. Um, I miss it. But I knew Dan from conferences and whatever, and so I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey," because I saw him as someone who was ahead of me in that sort of trajectory, and I said, "Hey, you've been doing this for a while. You've written some books. You're doing all this consulting, and I know it's pulled you away from day-to-day design work. I'm really worried about that. My skills will atrophy, or the technology is gonna change. What do you think?" And he's, "Look, this thing's going well for you. You should pursue it." Because if you ever decide you don't wanna do it anymore, it's not going the right way, you can always go back to doing design work. That's what he said to me. And I felt that was pretty comforting, actually,
Mm.
right? 'Cause you can
Yeah.
always go back. And I think that's true. I think that that is true. If I needed to go back, I could have gone back at any moment. And so I pushed forward, but I was not particularly comfortable with letting that go because in 2015, late 2015, early 2016, I didn't have incontrovertible evidence that this business that I had built inside Neo, which again, I was getting a salary for, right? I knew how much money the business was generating as a whole, which was, to be frank, a lot more than what I was getting paid, but I was really happy for my biweekly paycheck
Yeah.
back then,
Yeah.
right? I had no proof that this was gonna work outside of Neo, and that was the biggest risk for me, so that was a big concern.
And how did it go from being just jeffgothelf.com to now you have this partnership with Sense and Respond with Josh Seiden?
So Josh and I John look, I'll tell you what, everyone should have a Josh in their life.
That's lovely.
Um
I love.
No, it's true. Look, we are so lucky. He just visited me recently, and he and I have been working professionally together for 15 years at this point in one capacity or another. And that partnership has only strengthened over the years. And I can tell you, having been in the book publishing business for a little bit, if just writing a book with someone, one book with someone can be devastating. to a relationship. Now, he and I have written 3 together, continue to speak on a daily basis. So that's a win. But look, he and I got to know each other in the sort of the primordial soup of the agile and design world of New York City in kind of the late 2000s, early 2010s, that type of thing. And then he helped me bring Lean UX over the line, and we started this business together. When Neo ended and Pivotal started, I started my own consulting business, and then eventually he started his own consulting business. But there was no we had shared IP. There was no way to extricate my IP from his IP. And we didn't even try. There was no point. It wasn't like he was like, "No, you can't talk, you can't teach my stuff," and vice versa. There was none of that. It was more like, "Hey, I got this teaching gig. Do you want to come do it with me? Hey, I got this workshop. Do you want to come do it with me? Hey, I'm doing a workshop, a half-day workshop at this conference. I'm getting paid X. I'm going to give you 10, 20% because look, I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it without your material in there as well." And so we've had this amazingly collaborative and honest and transparent business relationship that's led to a very close friendship as well over the years, where he would get work and pull me in, and I would get work and I would pull him in. And we like working together. We like teaching together. It's easier with 2, and we have highly complementary personalities in that I speed him up, he slows me down, and that's all positive way. And so this had been going on for a decade, really, this sort of work. And then a couple of years ago, we said, look, there's a lot of work coming in. You and I can handle most of it, but it's a lot of work. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to scale here and build something bigger than just the 2 of us. And so we repurposed our Sense and Respond Press brand, which was our book publishing business we had done along the way. So we'd done another business together along the way to get here. And so we launched Sense and Respond Learning with the idea of scaling our content through contracted trainers around the world. And that's what we're building right now. And so this is the 3rd, I believe, business that Josh and I have started together. We've written 3 books together, and still friends. So,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. It's very unique and a very interesting arrangement because I don't think I've yet to see a partnership where you can also have your own consulting, independent consulting thing going on the side. Both.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So recently, a Brazilian university reached out, and they said, "Hey, we love your content. We love your material." They reached out to me specifically. They said, "We love your material. We want you to create a 4-hour graduate level course, online course that we can put as part of our program. And here's what we'll pay you for it." And it was a pretty decent paycheck. And I said, "Look, all this material is mine and Josh's. Can I bring Josh in?" And for some reason they said no. I don't remember exactly what. I mean, they were nice about it, right? But I don't remember why they said no. I said, "Okay, fine." And so I took the gig, and then I just sent Josh a note. I said, "Look, I got this gig. I took the note. I'm sending you 20%." Right? Like this, because that's the right thing to do, right? This doesn't exist without his contribution.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the key. And I think we learned that writing our first book together, was that when there's tension, when there's something that makes the other person feel icky, is that a good word?
Mhm. That
Right?
is a good word. I use it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually with
Um,
sales.
exactly. Bring it up. Bring it up quickly. Don't let it fester. Don't let it like simmer in there and make you angry or build resentment. Bring it up. And when we wrote the first book, we had to deal with everything. We had to deal with creative decisions where we disagreed. We had to deal with business decisions where we disagreed. We had to deal with ego decisions. Again, like for example, I had been writing Lean UX for nearly 2 years when Josh joined the project. And he was my 3rd or 4th editor, quote unquote, that had joined the project. And so when
Oh, wow.
O'Reilly finally agreed to publish the manuscript after Josh's help, I really struggled giving him a co-author credit initially, right, from an ego. So if you'll notice in Lean UX version 1, he's editor, I think. He gets an editor credit on there. And then since then, he's co-author. He's full co-author, right? So we had to deal with all that kind of stuff. And so building this business together and building this kind of side-by-side things together has been a lot easier because we've learned how to talk to each other, right? We've learned how to express concerns and not let anything fester. And then ultimately, the whole thing is much more worth it than the individual things on their own. So whatever has to happen is worth it.
Such a great story. It's an amazing, I think, testament to your friendship that you can go through so much and still be together and still be so successful. I did recently talk with Steve Portugal and Justin Dower, who were teaming up to kind of experiment and play with doing something a little similar where they'll have some joint projects, some joint endeavors, but still have their own independent things. And I think that's a fantastic way to go about it because partnerships can be tricky.
They can. And look, it comes down to sort of managing IP usage expectations, right? So if you and I don't know each other that well, but we decide that we're going to partner on something and then we partner on it, and then the next day you see me teaching your material without having spoken to you about it, without having come to, that's where this gets really tricky and really where it has the risk of getting nasty. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the key there, especially if there's kind of two very unique viewpoints that are coming together, understanding what you can and can't do with it and when you can and can't do it or how to handle those situations, I think is crucial to those successes. I mean, I got to tell you, look, I mean, I've seen so many partnerships, sometimes really long-standing partnerships, break up when these partners try to write a book together. Forget about building a business together. Like just try whose name goes first on the book,
Oh,
right? My God, I've seen that kill relationships.
yeah.
It's to me that's baffling. Right?
Yeah.
You want put your name first. I don't care. Who cares? Just let it go. Right? But people do care, right?
Yeah.
And it's so it's really difficult. I think there has to be a level of transparency and honesty for partnerships like this to work.
I wanted to transition a little bit to now. So, where things are at now. This has been a tricky time for a lot of us. I've talked to all kinds of UX consultants. Some are really big names that are very well known, and others are just starting out. And there's a common thread amongst all of them, which is in the last few years, it's been really hard on business with the economy and all the layoffs in tech. And I know my business has been negatively affected since research is often one of the first things cut from a budget. And now democratization of these efforts have become increasingly popular.
Mhm.
I was wondering, is this something that you're experiencing too, since I know training is often the first thing cut from budgets as well?
Here's what I believe to be true. And seasonality aside, right, and technological revolutions aside for a second. What I like to believe, let's put it that way, is that training is an evergreen business. And here's why, right? If things are going great, how do we reward our people? We get them exciting trainings and speakers and opportunities for professional development and ways to make them even more successful because we've got the extra cash and they're excited to do that. If things are going poorly, how do we retain the people that we want to retain, especially if we've gone through a couple rounds of layoffs and morale is in the dumps,
Mhm.
right? Well,
Yeah.
let's get them a good speaker or a class that they'll enjoy or help them kind of show them that we're still investing in them as well. So that's what I like to believe. I like to believe that training is an evergreen business regardless of how things are going. The truth is obviously somewhat different from that. It's the cycles can be difficult at times, but I'll tell you this much. Look, I've been doing this is I guess the 11th year technically of doing this solo to some extent and now with Josh, but every December comes around and everything slows down for the holidays. And I look at my wife and I'm like, this is it. That's the last time I'm gonna have to go get a job next year. No one's ever gonna hire me again.
Yeah,
That's
the
the
listeners
end.
can't see, but I'm nodding my head a lot. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, literally every December for 11 years, I do think that. I think I'm like, this is it. I'm gonna have to get a job next year. Go back to the corporate world after, gosh, 15 years or whatever of not doing it. And look, and then every January, everybody comes back to work and everybody's motivated and they're ready to go. And so, look, there is work, right? There are opportunities. We had a good inbound January this year, right? To be perfectly candid about it. And I think it's due to the fact that we do, I believe, a good job of staying top of mind and current in our conversations. I talk about this in Forever Employable, right? Like the
Yeah.
goal of all of this content creation and public conversation is to stay top of mind and to stay current, right? So really talking about the fundamentals and then how they relate to the current realities. And to me, I believe that is what continues to attract folks to Sense and Respond Learning, to Jeff, to Josh, to us in general.
Absolutely. It works. The content sharing works, keeps you top of mind. And in Forever Employable, you talk about planting your flag and
Mhm.
becoming known for something specific. And for the consultants listening, how narrow is narrow enough?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there are benefits to narrow niches if there's depth in that slice, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, I'm going to make something up. Let's say that, like, you do research, right? So, but it's research and you're going to focus strictly on medical devices. Like, medical devices is a thing that's not going away anytime soon, right? So but it is a very niche thing. But if you're going to plant your flag and say, look, I'm going to be the research person for medical devices companies, to me, that feels like a good hypothesis, right? Because there are lots of companies in that space. They need researchers to validate their hypotheses for the need and the design and the distribution of these medical devices, these solutions that they're building. And my guess is there aren't a ton of folks in that space. Those would be my assumptions,
Mhm.
right? So to me, that feels like a nice narrow slice that's deep enough for you to plant your flag and succeed there. So like whenever anybody needs a researcher for medical devices, like it's Kyle, it's gonna be Kyle or whatever, right? I think the risk, of course, is that you cut the slice so narrow that either there isn't enough work there to sustain you, or it's not deep enough, or it's crowded.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I think those are the risks, and that comes with a bit of research and a bit of testing that marketplace as well. But I think if you go too broad, people don't really know when to bring you in, right? I'm a designer. Okay, what do you make business cards? Like, what do you make?
Right.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you make cool coffee mugs? Like there's got to be more to that.
Mm.
Right. And so you're a designer of what? In what space? Where's your expertise? And I think that, and if you can articulate that clearly, like for example, right? Maybe let's make it a bit more modern, right? If you're trying to figure out how to bring AI into a design team, for example, and you're a consultant, right? Maybe you're the consultant who helps design teams integrate AI to make them more valuable inside an organization. That sounds really interesting to me. Or you help design teams inside large enterprises, right? Make sure that they make themselves even more valuable to their organizations than they are today using these modern tools, right? Something along those lines where it's very clear that you're combining these elements in a specific domain, right? And I'll share something. So Josh and I have been building a strategy class over the last few weeks and a product strategy class. And one of our biggest inspirations for strategy work is Roger Martin. Playing to Win is his book, among others. He's super prolific and very generous in sharing his thoughts around it. And he's very successful, very well known. He's a top guy when it comes to strategy, certainly top five, right? And he's got this very clear form. He wrote an article in Harvard Business Review in 2014 called The Big Lie of Strategic Planning. It's a great read. He totally gets how to think about the modern world strategically in a way that really embraces many of the same concepts that Josh and I have been promoting from design and product side for a long time. But in that article, he talks about two key questions for defining your strategy. Where will you play and how will you win? And you could apply those two questions to answer the question you just asked me. How thin or where should you plant your flag? What's the scope of the area where you're planting your flag? And I think if you asked yourself that, like, where will you play? Where will you play as a target market question? And you can slice that with any facet. You could slice it with industry. You could slice it with geography. You could slice it with company size, right? You could slice it with a specific target audience. You could slice it with a particular discipline, whatever it is. So, for example, where will you play? I'm going to play with digital design teams in large legacy enterprises. right? Banks, insurance companies, healthcare companies. That's where I'm going to play. How will you win? I'm going to help them integrate AI into their workflow so they become more valuable. That feels like a believable, a plausible
Mm.
strategic hypothesis. I don't know that it's true. I don't know that it's valuable, maybe. But the point is, that's a really nice way to kind of test where to plant your flag. And that's not in the book, right?
Yeah.
This is he's done more recently. But I think that's a really nice application of that here as well, because essentially you're making a strategic decision about your career.
Yeah.
And a really nice way to frame it. Where will you play? How will you win?
I've heard you repeat often from the philosopher Seneca that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And
Yes.
I was wondering, do you feel luck is a necessary element of success?
Look, I'm not the guy who reads the Stoics. I'm not that. Not that there's anything wrong with people like that. Read the Stoics if it makes you happy. I know lots of people who do. It's not me. But I do actually really like this particular quote. Like you said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I do think luck is important, but I think a lot of people miss their lucky breaks because they're not prepared, right? There's things will pass them by and they'll be like, ah, it's not for me. Not now. Maybe later. I don't think I could do it. All these doubts that arise. And I think that if you can position yourself in such a way, mentally, really, to say, look, I'm going to prepare myself for whatever comes my way. And because I'm interested in growing in this particular path, anything that I believe will take me down this path, I'm going to take advantage of. I'm going to exploit these opportunities. I think that's key. And the irony, of course, is that the more prepared you are, the more opportunities you generate. Right.
Mhm.
Inevitably. Preparedness means what is in our world of consulting and sort of personal branding and making yourself known to the world. Preparedness means that you understand your space and your domain and that you are creating some kind of a platform that tells people that you're an expert in this space, that you help them deal with this particular problem. And so, in the process of preparing yourself, you are actually generating more opportunities to come your way. So there's a real positive flywheel here that
Yeah.
makes you luckier.
And I can't agree more with that because things may fall in your lap, but why did they? What was the work that brought them there? And what do you do with it once they do? I remember listening to your podcast associated with the book, Forever Employable Stories, and Tendai Vicky, I think,
Mhm.
said it a little differently. He said, you have to work your blessings. And I
Mm,
thought that was rather beautiful and true. I
yeah.
just love that. And I do want to plug that for a minute. I just have to tell the listeners a bit more about that retired podcast. I enjoyed it so, so much. It was just a fantastic mix of the most eclectic guests with inspiring stories about becoming forever employable. You had everyone from the guitarist from Whitesnake and
Yeah.
Trans-Siberian Orchestra to a famous chef, a dog trainer, as well as people in tech. And each one had such an inspiring message. So I just encourage everyone to give it a listen. It was very well done.
Thank you. I miss it. I miss it. And just getting that Whitesnake guitarist being the first guest was a big win for 15-year-old Jeff. So it's
Oh,
just,
it's awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you ever think you would revive it and put out another season?
I would love to. Strategically, it doesn't make sense for me right now because that's not the work that I'm pushing or promoting at the moment. I would love to come back to it. I did really enjoy it, and the guests were really sort of all over the place and really fun and quirky people. I appreciate you saying that. That was fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's still so relevant even today. I mean, it was done 2021, I think. And
Yeah,
even now,
exactly.
the stories are still great. And I got so much out of them. But I do want to transition a little bit to your writing. I mentioned I wanted to talk more about that. So, all the books you've written and your latest one, Who Does What by How Much? I mean, you've got countless articles out there, an active blog, a very popular newsletter called Continuous Improvement. So, no doubt you are a very prolific writer. And my first question is, do you actually sleep?
Yeah.
Why? When do you find time to write this much?
Right. So look, it has become a discipline, to be totally fair, right? So I write the Monday blog post on Sunday mornings, and I block an hour. It's time boxed. It's an hour long activity. It's not designed to be a heavy editing piece. It's not designed to be a heavily researched piece. Normally, it's designed to be an idea that I can capture in 500 to 1,000 words and write and finish the whole activity in an hour. So that's the Monday blog post is dedicated, has a Sunday dedication, and that's the way they do it. And it's a discipline. It happens every Sunday in the morning, not at the exact same time, but in the morning on Sundays so that it's done and it's ready for Monday. Honestly, the hardest part of that is just coming up with topics. And so as long as I have a topic going into it, I can get it done in an hour. If I don't
Oh,
have a
nice.
topic going into the writing session on Sundays, I'll spend for 15 or 20 minutes of that hour deciding what to write on. So what I like to do, what I've been doing recently, and this is the nice part of AI, is not having AI write the blog posts, but having AI as a thought partner to think through gaps in the content that I haven't written so far. Or for
Mhm.
example, I saw this amazing video recently that really inspired me from Nate Jones. He's a daily YouTuber who talks about AI, and I don't watch every day, but I saw this really nice video of his where he talks about how AI tools are fundamentally changing the product development process, which is near and dear to my heart. And so I took his transcript and I took my work and I went into ChatGPT and I was like, look, this is really interesting to me. Help me sort through this to come up with a series of talks that combine his ideas with some of my ideas, right? And it came up with 8, 10 different topics. And I liked 4, 5, or 6 of them or whatever. And it evolved it a few times. And so now I've got an editorial calendar for the next 6 weeks, and that keeps me going. So that's really helpful there. The newsletter, I write one of them once a month, and I have a content marketing agency that writes the second one once a month.
Okay. Yeah.
So I do half of those. I approve everything. Everything is based on my work. Everything is based on my content, but they write one of them and I write the other one. So again, nothing ever goes out without me seeing it or approving it or editing it, but that's how that happens. And they do a lot of the LinkedIn work that
Mm.
I do as well. And look on the books, but the book is a big decision to take on. And we really have to have a thesis that we believe in and the time to do it. So when we wrote Who Does What by How Much, we had a clear thesis that we believed in, which is human-centric objectives and key results. And we had the time because we weren't starting a company at the time.
Yeah.
I don't recommend writing a book and starting a company. That's a bit much. And so that was helpful. So
Mm.
I don't have any plans for another book at the moment. If inspiration strikes and we can build some bandwidth, so if we can get sense and respond learning rolling nicely, maybe, but that really takes a lot of dedication and commitment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so really it's discipline, a little bit of outsourcing, and then just understanding the necessary time commitments to do good work. I think that's really important. And then making sure you have that kind of time commitment.
Yeah. When you mentioned time blocking with the newsletter, is that something that you do as well when you're writing a book?
You kind of have to, right? And look,
Yeah.
every book that I've written 5 books, but the 3 long ones, right? The longest ones, Lean UX, Sense and Respond, Who Does What by How Much, were written at 3 very different times in my life. And so, for example, Lean UX was written when my kids were super little and I was commuting back and forth to New York City, 90 minutes each way. And so at that time in my life, I literally wrote on the train. I had 40 minutes on the train one way, and then the rest I had to walk in whatever subways, and then 40 minutes back. And then I would stay up late after the kids would go to bed. And then occasionally I would beg my wife for a weekend morning. I'd be like, look, can I just please Sunday morning? I didn't do it a lot because the kids were little and they were a lot. And so that was I kind of begged for that. Sense and Respond, things were a bit more stable at that point, and I was able to carve out clear writing times. I found myself traveling. I was traveling extensively for work at that point in my career, consulting at
Mhm.
that point, and traveling all over the world. Airplanes are terrific for writing,
Yeah.
right? Hotel rooms in faraway places, terrific for writing. So that was easy as well. And then Who Does What by How Much was written in the last couple of years, where I've built a really comfortable work-life balance. And I was able to build that time into that balance. And so I
Nice.
was really, so it's become a lot easier over time. A lot having to do with my kids just kind of growing up.
Yeah,
Ultimately,
being older. Yeah,
yeah.
sure. Now, you also have a Substack too, is that right?
So that's the email newsletter. Yeah. So, and
That
then we
is
just recently
okay, it's
moved
the
over to
same.
Substack. Yeah. And so that's been my email newsletter for years. And
Uh-huh.
now we just recently moved the whole thing over to Substack.
Now, in Forever Employable, you highly recommend starting a newsletter. And it being 6 years later now, do you still think that is an absolute must?
The thing you have to do is you have to own your audience. I think that's the key, right? The risks that we've taken with these social media platforms is that they own the audience, right? You can't export your LinkedIn followers. You can't get their emails. The same thing's true for Instagram or for the site formerly known as Twitter or, whatever platform you use, right? And so really the only way to own your audience is either to write your own blog, and even then you don't really know who's visiting your site unless they're signing in, right? Is to build a community of some kind or to have an email newsletter, right? And that's because with email you own the audience. And I think that's key, right? Because that allows you to do what you want to do with that audience. And so people have been trying to kill email forever, but I think it's still really hard. And I think it's still super valuable.
Yeah, and now nobody likes being at the mercy of the LinkedIn algorithm. It sucks. Twitter dying. It just everything has changed so much recently. So I can see how that's true. I'm kind of sad though, I'll admit, because I still, over 20 years consulting, I still don't have a newsletter and I'm just staying away from it because it's a lot. It's a lot to add on to everything. And I love doing other things like the podcast. But yeah, I know it's facing me. I probably have to do that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
look, and I think part of it too is that initially it's going to be a lot of shouting in the wind, you know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, not totally in the wind, but that's the point. I mean, you have to start somewhere, and we don't start with a million readers, sadly.
Yeah. Right. I wanted to touch on a little bit about business development for you. What is your process for building and maintaining client relationships?
I've joked about this forever, and my quote unquote joke is that I'm a one trick pony, right? I know one thing, and the thing that I know is content marketing. And that may sound self-serving, and to a degree it is. I'm trying to build a business. Well, now I'm paying tuition. I'm not trying so much to feed the kids, but pay college tuition. That's the goal.
Tough. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do talk about this in Forever Employable is the one trick here is be generous.
Mm.
Be generous to the community. Just give it away, right? Whatever the idea is, whatever the method is, whatever the process is, whatever the tool is, or the format, or the canvas, or the methodology, right? If you look at the people who have done well, right, who have built these kinds of well known, like Teresa Torres, for example,
Mhm.
right? Opportunity solution trees. She doesn't hide that behind a paywall. Maybe you have to give her an email address. Okay, whatever. It's free, right? You get it all, right? She's super generous, right? Melissa Perry for years has been super generous with her work. My friend Kate Leto, right, who does product manager coaching, super generous. Andy Polaine, same thing. All of these folks are out there giving back to the community, right? That to me is maintaining the relationship with the community and building client relationships. I just don't know that I'm doing it. Right? I don't
Yeah.
know. And this is the hard part, and this is the frustrating part of doing work this way, is you have no idea when those are going to convert into some kind of a business relationship.
Yeah.
For example, I gave a speech at Mind the Product. I think it was 2016 in London. Great gig, like one of the best gigs that you can get, right? 2,000 people, beautiful stage, right? You look great. Everyone looks great. When it comes to credibility, being on stage at the Barbican, yeah, it's hard to look more credible than that. I got off stage. Some guy came up to me and he's like, "Hey, I loved what you said. Come talk to me." And I ended up getting like 4 years worth of consulting work from that one
Oh,
speech.
wow.
And that
Yeah.
converted like that, right? Well, conversely, I had a guy come up to me one time and he's, "Hey, I saw you speak in my company 5 years ago, right? I've been following you ever since then. And I'm finally in a position where I can hire you." And to me, that speaks to that continuous nurturing, that generous
Yeah.
giving back to the community. So I was fortunate enough to give a speech or whatever I did at his company, and he was fortunate enough to be there, but he was not in a position to hire me. But by me maintaining sort of a passive relationship with him through giving back to the community, when he found himself in a position where he needed some support, I was top of mind.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
me, that's the trick. That's like my one trick. That's all I seem to know how to do.
I can absolutely relate. So I just recently finally got approved on a project. The initial outreach was back in 2019.
Mm,
And there's been
jeez.
all this like starts and stops of, yeah, we're going to do it. Oh, no, we're not. And, da, da, da. And it's like, now we're actually doing it. And I can't even believe it's actually finally happening. But sometimes these cycles are long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after you've had an engagement with a client, they've hired you to do some team training. Do you have a formal process for staying in touch? Do you stay in touch or do you just let them come to you if they need you again?
I'm bad at that. That's the
Me
truth.
too. I am
The
too.
truth is, yeah, I'm not great at it. There's a part of me that really loves the part of the consulting that's like, okay, bye. There's a part of me that really enjoys like that's one of the perks, right? One
Yeah.
of the perks of
Yeah.
consulting is you don't have to stick around, right?
Mhm.
Right? I can go, I'm going home now and good luck with everything. And so there's a part of me that really likes that. And so I'm bad at sort of undoing that and coming back and saying, hey, it's been a month or whatever, 6 weeks since we last saw each other. How are things? Are things sticking around? So I'm bad at that. The good news is that I now have with Sense and Respond Learning, we have a couple of folks in our 5-person organization dedicated to doing exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I've got people to do that for me, and they're much
Mhm.
better, much motivated to do it. But yeah, personally, I'm bad at it.
And kind of on a similar line here, I have a small group of consultants that I chat with, and one of them was asking everyone about how they get feedback from clients on what the experience was like with them working with you. And I was like, I really got to do that. I don't do
Mhm.
that. Do you do that? Do you have a formal process for getting feedback on the experience?
No.
Yeah.
Again, this speaks exactly to the answer from the last question. I really like leaving.
Well, it makes me feel a lot better if that
Yeah.
makes you feel better.
Look, and the way I see it is if they liked me, they'll call.
Yeah.
Although I will say this, I don't know how long ago this was. This was maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I did a gig at rentalcars.com in Manchester, England.
Mm.
And the chief product officer there was this remarkable woman who I've not seen since. Unfortunately, I don't know where she is these days, but she was truly remarkable. And she offered to give me feedback afterwards. She was like, hey, I'd love to give you some feedback on how it was working with you. And I took her up on that offer, and it was a lot of tough love. And I really appreciate it. And to this day, her words resonate
Mm.
with me, right? Because, for example, she said something like, it's clear to me which parts of your job you love and which parts you don't like.
Oh, wow.
And then she
Wow.
listed them. And I was like, you're absolutely right. I like this part and I hate this part. And she goes, it was clear to me from the interactions with you that this was the case, right? Stuff like that. And so really valuable stuff. And so I do feel it's valuable. I don't solicit it very often, but if it comes proactively, I will take it.
That was a real gift she gave
It
you.
was.
Yeah,
It was.
yeah,
No doubt about it. And I remember her more than I remember 99% of my other clients
yeah,
in a positive way.
yeah. Well, since we're towards the end of our time here, I just wanted to wrap up with some rapid fire questions here. In your opinion, what makes a consultant good?
I think it's a consultant who deeply cares about understanding the problem that their client is facing rather than trying to fit their solution to the gig.
Yeah. And what's one piece of business advice you've received that you now find yourself repeating to others?
People value expensive things. And honestly, I say this to myself all the time. I say it to others. I'm an expensive consultant. I'm not the most expensive consultant, but I'm expensive. And there are people who are much cheaper than me. And when I bid on a project, somebody say, well, I got this other person and they're a tenth of what you charge. I'll say, go ahead and work with them. And 9 out of 10 times they'll come back. Either they'll go with
Yep.
that person and then they'll come back. The bottom line is this: people take care to engage with something they paid a lot of money for. Think about it. If I gave you free concert tickets to a band you'd never heard of, and you went to that show and you watched that band play, and like a couple songs in, you're like, I don't like this, I'm leaving. And you leave because I gave you free tickets. Now, what if you paid $500 per ticket? You spent $1,000 on a pair of tickets,
You're
right?
not
3
leaving.
songs in, you're like, I don't like it. You're not leaving.
Yeah.
People value expensive things. They engage with them more. They give it a chance. I remember years ago, I was teaching a workshop in Boston at O'Reilly's offices in downtown Boston, and we hadn't sold enough tickets. We sold enough, but not a ton. And so they filled the rest of the room with some free seats they gave to,
Mhm.
I don't know to who. It was super clear to me as the instructor who paid and who didn't,
Right.
right?
Sure.
And so if you want engaged clients, if you want to get paid your worth, and you want people to respect what you do, be expensive.
Great advice. Just a question here. What consulting resources have been most helpful for you, whether it's coaches, books, podcasts, anything that you would recommend?
The legendary book, A Million Dollar Consulting, it's probably in its like 47th edition at this point, right? But everyone should read it. And the author who wrote, I don't remember his name anymore, but everyone should read it, number one. And everybody reads it for the same thing, the pricing chapter, right? And he knows this. If you read the preface to the book, it'll say, I know you're here to get to the pricing chapter, right? And it's chapter 8 or whatever. Go to
Yeah.
it now and read it and then come back and read
Mhm.
the rest of it. But Million Dollar Consultant, I think is what it's called actually. That book it's highly relevant today. It doesn't change in the face of AI or anything else. And it really gives you a clear sense of how to think about you as a business and how to position yourself, how to price yourself, how to negotiate. I think that's a big one. And I will say, actually, I just thought of one more now that I said
Oh, yeah.
negotiate. The other one is Never Split the Difference by Chris
Oh,
Voss. Very popular bestseller. I think he did a TED Talk. He was an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. And the book is about how to negotiate in business. But every chapter starts with a story from his career, which is fascinating and terrifying. And he demonstrates the tactic that that he used in the field, and then how you would use it in business.
oh,
And so,
fantastic.
those 2 books have been very important to me.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you sharing all this wisdom with us. It was so, so helpful, so rich. And I will be sure to include links to everything in the show notes. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. I'm glad you invited me. I'm glad to be here. This is a great conversation.
I'm so glad. And where should folks find you, keep up with everything you're doing?
Sure. I mean, jeffgothelf.com, always a great place to go. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then senseandrespond.co is our company website.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
All right. That wraps up this episode. Thanks for joining me. So, do you have a topic or a question that you would like us to explore on a future episode of the UX Consultants Lounge? Perhaps there's an anonymous consulting story you want to submit. If so, click on the link in the show notes to submit your story or question from the podcast website. Until next time, keep that consultancy going. I can't wait to have you back at the lounge for our next episode.